Honky Tonk man is back online. Anyway, we got so much to cover today, and I don't know, maybe we can't get it all done in one of these segments, but we're going to try. First of all, let me say that this particular weekend coming up, I just left Tijuana, Mexico, and if you've never been to Tijuana, oh gosh, you need to go to Tijuana. But then I'm going to St. Cloud, Minnesota for a wrestling show for Heavy on Wrestling. They're a great organization. Heavy on Wrestling. They put on some big cards once or twice a year. They've had the Funk Brothers. They've had Mick Foley. They've had the Honky Tonk Man. They've had numerous other big-time guests that come over and perform on their shows. But we get down to the nuts and the bolts of this whole thing. It's now the ratings are in. The ratings are finally in. After what, 2-3 weeks now? TNA is falling. I mean, they are circling like, can I say this? Like a turd going down a toilet. Unbelievable. Hey, Bubba the Love Sponge, where are you? And you create ratings. Eric Bischoff, where are you when you say, I'm a no-good douchebag, but yet your wife runs a website and runs a business where she is some kind of a life Christian believing in God. Does she know that what you said about me is I'm a no-good douchebag? Would God believe in that? So what I'm saying to my honkomaniacs is here's what we need to do. We got to bombard her website and let her know that her husband is a no-good douchebag. And her husband couldn't draw flies with a mouthful of shiz, it happens. Man, that Dixie Carter, boy, she got herself on TV, didn't she? Well, once you start putting your family and yourself on TV, your wife, your children, your family, things tend to go downhill. Except now, the exception is Vince McMahon. Vince has put himself on TV, but Vince knows when and how and where to put himself on TV. He's put himself on TV now against Bret Hart. And I'm glad Bret came back into the fold because I know Bret had struggled with, wrestling with shadows is something that's been Bret's life. And I'm glad Bret buried the hatchet because we all have to. I did it. Someone asked, I've been asked a million times, would you go back to WWE? Well, I said, of course I would if they called me and it was the right offer to go back. Would I go to TNA? Of course I would if it was the right offer and I had they gave me, woo, Scott Hall, woo, sweet fat contract, Wolfpack in the house, daddy. Okay, forget about all that bullshit. But getting back to this. Vince Russo said in his book about 9 or 10 years ago, he even stated this on television, I think, anyone who was over 35 shouldn't be in the wrestling business. Well, Vince Russo, you're over 35. Eric Bischoff's over 35. Hogan's over 35. Scott Hall's over 35. And the main event, one of the main events at WrestleMania is Vince McMahon, who is over 60, and Bret Hart, who is over 55. So if these guys are all washed up after 35 years old, why the hell are you, Vince Russo, still hanging around? Or why the hell are you, Eric Bischoff, still hanging around? And the most pathetic thing that, even you said this, Venutra, and I'm not being a Jimmy Cornette. I love Jimmy Cornette to death, but I'll tell you what, Jimmy Cornette tells it exactly like it is. And if I ran a wrestling business today, if I won $100 million lottery, I would buy TNA. And I'd fire every one of those bastards there, and I'd hire Jimmy Cornette, and I would say, Jimmy, come in, and let's recreate this company. Because Jimmy Cornette understands the wrestling business. He understands that people like Vince Russo and people like Eric Bischoff and pawns on the... Hogan is only a pawn. Hogan runs TNA? Give me a break. Whoever said Hogan ran? Hogan says, well, I run TNA. Well, what about that strip poker angle? Well, hey, I didn't write that. I didn't do that. Okay. So now you're passing the buck to somebody else. When I said I had a deal working with TNA, it meant nothing about wrestling. They contacted me about having a Legends action figure made. And when I said, sure, I'd be interested, and I posted I was working on a deal with TNA, everyone assumed, even Eric Bischoff and that big fat Bubba the Love Sponge. Here's what I understood. Bischoff shaved his head because the hair on his head was irritating Hogan's backside, because every time Eric tried to get out of Hogan's backside, it irritated him. Can you imagine the battle royal that's going on inside Hogan's backside right now? Well, we have Beefcake looking for a job. We have Knobs, who already has a job. And we have Bubba the Love Sponge up there. And we have Eric Bischoff up there. And it looks like Dixie Carter, she might be up there too. This is incredible, folks. I'm telling you. It's the biggest thing, and I don't want to give them publicity because they don't deserve it, because it's back to what I said earlier. Russo wrote in his book, the most pathetic thing he saw was two old guys like Ric Flair and Hogan rolling around in the ring trying to recreate their youth. And it is really pathetic. But Jesse Ventura now has come out. Finally, Jesse, thank you, Jesse Ventura. Thank you, after all these years of being so silent about the wrestling business, that you have stepped forward to say it's the most pathetic thing you've ever seen. Is Hogan and Flair trying to recapture their youth. And just not so long ago, if you're listening, this past week, and we're on March 22nd or 23rd, March 22nd, 23rd, I don't remember. Anyway, Jesse stated and did an interview where he said Eric Bischoff was a notorious liar, and Eric Bischoff had lied about everything he'd ever said. So, fans, this is it. I have no vendetta against Bischoff. I said it before. I said it 10 years ago. If his heart was on fire and he was laying on the side of the highway and I walked along and he looked up and he stuck his hand in the air and he said, "Honky Tonk Man, please, please, piss in my mouth to put my heart that's on fire out. Would you please do this to save my life?" I would have to say, Eric, the only thing I can do is defecate, which is mean it in your mouth to choke you to death. You are a cancer. Vince Russo is a cancer. And more people, I mean, do I have to say, Hulk, is not a cancer, but he's a manipulator. Enough said, folks. We got more to come. Till we meet again, adios and vaya con Dios. That means goodbye, and I love this place.